So last week, I had a meeting with some other members of the Ceph community, Avan, who runs who's written the Ceph exporter, and Ilya, who's the RBD lead, and we talked about the labeled perf counters work. I have something that does have labeled RGW perf counters, and I learned at least in the short term in Ilya's case, he doesn't need to have that many labeled perf counters going out from his daemon. But the one thing that Casey and I in the group at least chatted about briefly was what happens when we have an explosion of perf counters. And discussion I was hoping to have was how could we do some filtering so that only the perf counters the user would want to see, or the metrics the user would want to see, is getting sent to the exporter instead of everything. So I know Casey had mentioned thorny solution to this, which was trying to figure out who the hot users and hot buckets are, and then only enabling those labeled perf counters to be set or used if a user is quote unquote hot or a bucket is hot. But I don't know if you had any thoughts past that, Casey, or what the other people on the call think.
Right. I mean, I don't think that we have any really firm plans for this. I think that we were just looking at per user and per bucket stats as kind of a scaling problem that we need a solution for.
Mm-hmm.
Matt, I remember in earlier discussions, we had just kind of assumed that there would be some way for either users to say which buckets they want counters for, or some automated way to turn them on and off.
Yeah, I mean, we had discussions with the Red Hat storage management team. We discussed a variety of things, especially with the upstream dashboard team. One idea we thought of was just having a top 10 buckets or something along those lines. Having a policy that I think that's how I remember that something that sounds like what you're saying, an automated way. And I haven't given thought to a way for users to specify a different strategy for selecting specific buckets. But the most busy ones is an obvious choice.
I mean, if they wanted to select specific users or buckets, is that just something they could run an admin command for?
We'd have to provide a way to propagate that information, but it's something we could imagine doing, or with some other technique.
Right. Somehow that information would have to filter into the perf counters logic to decide whether or not to ignore certain labels, right?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe add built-in scripting to define what you're measuring on.
Making it available to scripting would be acceptable. I don't think we make this the only strategy for doing it, but it might be something we could fold in early. It would be interesting to see what impact the performance that would have. Anyway, would you guys agree that successive approximations are our way to handle this? I mean, we definitely don't want to incorporate. I mean, the current it'd be great if we could have a comment, if we could support a combinatorial explosion of such information, but in particular, Prometheus can't handle it, and there are logical problems with it.
Yeah, Prometheus cannot handle that. How would when you say approximation, you mean like a top 10 list?
Well, I mean,
Like
that's an approximation, but I mean, it's like, all I meant by suggested for approximations is we can iteratively do more things. If we can come up with some strategy that we can do now, and maybe other ways to improve it.
So Ali, I would say that this is not part of the perf counters project. It's just something else we would have to build that like feeds into the perf counters, saying, you know, enable counters on these labels. So as long as the perf counters classes supported the ability to enable and disable certain things, then I think that we could just kind of hand wave the rest for now.
Okay. I'm trying to, I want to have like V2 of my work with whatever feedback was there last week, and to present whatever the newer interfaces would be by next week. So I will keep that in mind. But it sounds like for the near term, I should just focus on that, and then we'll continue this discussion a little bit later once that whatever perf counters interface changes I make, if any, are set in stone for the quote unquote dumb method. The dumb method being there's no filtering of the perf counters at all. Just everything goes to the exporter into Prometheus.
All right. Any other thoughts here? Dan, would you introduce the next one?
Yeah. So the process of modularization, I worked on the admin APIs, and there are APIs that are currently Rado specific. Moving those out was simple because that's at the handler level. And so I can just create one API method in the store that says add my store's admin API handlers. Piece of cake. We're almost done with modularization, and one of the big things left is the PubSub Ops. Now, these ops are not at the handler level. They're part of the normal S3 level of ops. So they're at the op level, which means they're mixed in with all the other S3 ops. So there's post ops and put ops and fleet ops and everything like that. That makes it more complicated to do what I did before of just having a add my handler to the admin APIs. So I'm wondering if anyone has a better idea of how we can break this up and make it sort of cleaner to implement.
So some of the PubSub APIs are S3 APIs, are like bucket ops. When you add identification to a bucket, it's a bucket op.
Right.
There are others that are not S3 APIs, like anything that has to do with topics. This is not S3. This could be split to something else. There are also like legacy APIs there that, to be honest, we can just remove. We don't need to support them.
Okay, the topic APIs are currently part of S3 Outpost, or at least one of them is. So that's an S3 op. Notification APIs are also S3 ops.
Notification should be S3 ops. I mean,
Right.
in AWS they are S3 ops. So
Right.
the topics should not be there. I'm not sure why. And there are a couple of that are kind of legacy from some old interface that we had that was not compatible with anything, and we can just delete them.
Okay. Those don't seem to be in the S3 code, so they would be automatically in the module, right? Because all the PubSub code is in the module already. So the problem is the S3 code has PS topic and 2 PS notification ops that are currently part of the REST S3 code.
Okay, so as I said, the topics should not be there. The notifications, like, I'm not sure what would be the best option, because they are S3 APIs.
Right.
So they operate on buckets. Those are like bucket policies and other things that operate on buckets.
So do we know exactly what Rados specific things we're doing there that makes it hard to run them by default?
We're storing the information in Rados object. We're storing the configuration in Rados object.
And it's separate from like the bucket objects that that Cell can operate on. Huh. So we'd need to build support into Cell itself for that.
I mean, ideally, the only reason this is done like that is because initially it was implemented unrelated to the S3 spec. But the correct thing to do is to store that in the same place where we store all kind of bucket metadata, like, I don't know, bucket policies.
Okay, so just in bucket X adders?
Or something like that. Yeah, I mean, this is the most logical place to store them. That would also, like, we fixed lots of things. Like, we had all kind of issues with kind of cascade deletes. When you delete the bucket, then you have to go and delete all the rest of the configuration information. If everything is really tied to the bucket, as it should be, then this is not a problem. I guess making this change is not too difficult. The difficult part is to think about a migration path, because you have existing deployments with configuration, and you have to migrate the configuration from the old one to the new one. So this would be a problem.
Do we need to track like an index of buckets that have notifications? Isn't that part of the notification manager, like how it processes the queues?
The queues is not really so. I mean, everything is stored per bucket, per topic, when it comes to the processing of notifications themselves.
Okay,
But
so it's
but this is
of topics, not of buckets.
Yeah, but this is the actual sending. The sending of the notifications are done per bucket, per topic. But the configuration information is stored in system objects that are kind of per bucket, per notification. Like, whenever you define notification, you create a system object that has the bucket name and the topic name, that together they define a notification. And this is a system object that we have to manage. This is what the problem is. The information, in theory, could have been just stored inside the bucket information.
Got it. Okay.
But again, the main problem is not to re-implement the data structure. It's pretty easy. The main problem would be to figure out a migration path. I'm not sure how to do that. I mean, this week, like, tons of code for just doing the migration.
So I guess my question is, what's easier, finding adding a Sal API to enable or disable per app, or adding a Sal API to do whatever call it is that we need to write these objects?
I would counter with a slightly different question. Do we think we're likely to need PerStore Ops in general, or no? And this is the only one we currently have.
I mean, I feel like our S3 layer should support any backend. I'm less clear on admin APIs and other stuff.
So do you think we should be able to do PerStore Ops? Or do you think all of our ops should apply to all of our stores?
Right. I think ideally all of our S3 apps should work with any store, so we shouldn't need to disable per app based on backend.
So I think it's probably easier to do PerStore Ops, and it's probably cleaner to do a PubSub API for Zipper.
When you say PubSub API, I just want to clarify. I mean, PubSub, in the fullness of time, isn't something in the original PubSub interface isn't something we need to or want to support long term. But we want to support the ones that are portable.
No, I mean this would be basically the what you've all said, the place to store the topic config and then the bucket and topic notification config.
I understand. I guess maybe it's not important, but let's not reify the notation of the old API in some way if we can avoid it.
Yeah,
I mean,
the code says PubSub, like in those. It's just that the code said that, so that is where the confusion is.
So for Sal, we already have a notification class, which is related to these same bucket notifications. Is there any way that we could build on that, or would it be a separate API object?
I don't know.
Or just part of
I
bucket?
mean, a notification is sort of conceptually different from configuration of of the classes of notifications,
Right.
but maybe.
Yeah,
Well, the notification is, but as you've also, I mean, it's the same. All I'm getting at is that PubSub claimed a certain language, but it came from Google GCP, and even then it was changed. You know, but so S3 has notification topics or something like that.
Yeah, so I mean, what Daniel referred to is that the existing abstraction that we have is for the content of the notification, not the configuration of.
Yeah, I know totally. But it is the fact that it just happened. It just also uses it lexically it's notification. But yeah, I mean, I worked on it, so yeah. But I mean, we could have notification topic or some other thing, or we could have some sort of an structural demarcation of it.
Yeah. To me, it feels like these would be bucket APIs in Sal to write or read these config objects. And at some point in the future, we could converge on using the existing attributes to store them. But for now, just adding a separate API that only Rados implements based on the current code might be the easiest way.
Okay.
Maybe as a preliminary step, I'll try to. We already said that we're going to remove some legacy functionality, maybe in Reef. So maybe as a preliminary stage, I can do the cleanup. So there's less APIs to implement, and we need to implement only the thing that really matters.
Yeah, that would be helpful. Thanks.
Yeah, at least start with an audit of the stuff that's in the RGW REST S3. because I think that's what's blocking Dan right now.
I'm going to have a look there.
All right. Anything more to say on this one?
Nope.
Any other topics then? I suppose I can plug the HTTP3 front end prototype that I have. It's kind of working. If anybody's interested in helping to test or develop that, let me know. If there's nothing else, let's call it here. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.
Bye.
You.